Welcome to Golden Blue Dude, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget, you can send gear to represent your team for the background of Golden Blue Dude forever. Just send gear to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Let's get to the next video. Hopefully, we are getting you through the off season, because there is no off season here at Golden Blue Dude, without as much withdrawal from college football, because let's face it, it gets tough in the off season. College football fans lose interest. So if I just kept talking about predictions for 2023 or talking about last year, 2022, people would get bored. So even if these predictions don't come true, my job is to entertain you. So as long as I'm getting you through the offseason, I am doing my job. Speaking of which, I'm going to be talking about teams that could possibly be thinking about jumping from either the Big Ten or the SEC. That is unheard of. Usually teams are jumping from the ACC or the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or whatever, Group of 5 conferences, so on and so forth, but not the Big 10 and not the SEC. Come to think about it, has anybody jumped from the ACC? We all know that the ACC is in trouble, but I don't think as of right now anybody has jumped from the ACC. Anyways, I digress. I'm talking about teams jumping from the Big 10 and from the SEC. Possibly a straight up swap. Two teams come to mind. The two teams that I'm talking about are Texas A&M and Nebraska. Since Texas A&M joined the SEC, they've had decent success, nothing to truly pound your chest about. Overall, they've gone 90-48. That's a winning percentage of 65.2%. That's decent. Their best season was actually way back in 2012 when they went 11-2. You could argue the season for 2020 when they went 9-1, one spot away from getting into the playoffs. You could argue that season. But as far as overall wins, it's 2012. Jimbo Fisher hasn't done much with some of the best resources in the entire nation. Texas A&M fans are starting to get a little bit antsy about that. But on top of that, now Texas is coming into the SEC. And Texas was the reason why Texas A&M left the Big 12. And that's also the reason why the SEC kept it on the down low as far as Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC until basically it was time to vote. They did not want Texas A&M raising a big stink about it. But even afterwards, Texas A&M voiced their opinion. They are not happy that Texas is coming into the SEC. I don't think Texas will have as much power and will be able to shove their weight around like they did in the Big 12, but still not happy that Texas, one of the main reasons why the Aggies left the Big 12. Speaking of a team who's one of the main reasons to leave the Big 12 was Texas, I'm talking about Nebraska. Nebraska hasn't fared as well as Texas A&M. Nebraska in the Big 10, not good at all. Overall, 75-72. That is a winning percentage of 51%. That is not the big red machine that I remember growing up. That is pitiful. Now, they had some early success in the Big 10. 9-4, 10-4, 9-4, 9-4. But whenever they got rid of Bo Pelini, that's when things really started taking a dip. Maybe they should have given him more time. I don't know. Maybe they were still thinking about the Big Red Machine days. I don't know. But that turns out to be a pretty big mistake, because they've taken a nosedive into oblivion. Not even being relevant. Not even getting to a bowl. They haven't been to a bowl in what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons. Nebraska hasn't been to a bowl in 6 seasons. Are you kidding me? That is insane. That should not happen. I think Nebraska is just not a good fit in the Big 10. So they could possibly think about leaving the Big 10 and swap places with Texas A&M. It is entirely possible. Now, one of the reasons why they left the Big 12, of course, Texas is going into the SEC. So they would be leaving the Big 10 to go to a conference where Texas is. So I'm not so sure about that. But I will say this. I do think that Nebraska would fit in the SEC culturally much better in the SEC over the Big 10. The money's very comparable. I do think they would have more success in the SEC. I know that sounds crazy. Golden Blue, what are you talking about? The SEC West especially is much tougher than the Big 10 West. I understand that, but it's just that Nebraska they don't fit in the Big 10 like everybody thought they might could. But they just don't fit. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I don't know what the problem is, but Nebraska is not a good fit in the Big 10. Texas A&M is a decent fit in the SEC. I think Texas A&M would be a good fit in the Big 10. They have AAU status, so they checked the box right there. And don't forget about this. Nebraska lost AAU status about a year into their membership of the Big 10. Maybe less than a year. So the Big Ten might not be too unhappy with this swap. They probably would let Nebraska go and bring in Texas A&M and they would be happy. Would that change the numbers at all for the Big Ten and the SEC? Could it lower the numbers slightly for the SEC, and could it bump the numbers up slightly for the Big Ten? Well, for the SEC, no. I don't think it would affect the numbers negatively at all. I do think Nebraska brings value to the SEC. I do think Nebraska fits in the SEC a little bit better than what they do in the Big Ten. I'm not sure if they would have more success because, yeah, the SEC is tougher than the Big Ten as a conference as a whole. But I think they would fit in the SEC. Now, for Texas A&M jumping to the Big Ten, that could actually help with the revenue because Texas A&M is a very valuable brand. I just think with the SEC bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, it wouldn't matter that much if they did a straight-up swap. Hey, Big Ten, you take Texas A&M, we'll take Nebraska, and we'll call it even. I think the Big Ten is the conference that would benefit from that swap, and it is entirely possible. I don't know if they would call it a swap, but maybe the teams would just be saying, hey, we're leaving the SEC. If you're Texas A&M, we're leaving the SEC. A few months later, hey, we're joining the Big Ten. Same with Nebraska. Hey, we're leaving the Big Ten. A few months later, hey, we're joining the SEC. I think it would be something like that. So even though we all would know that it would be a swap, it would be labeled as a swap. And I will say the Big Ten would be very happy if this happened because Texas A&M does have AAU status and they do have better academics than Nebraska. So they would actually be happy about this and gaining a footprint in the state of Texas. Now, it's the SEC that wouldn't be too happy about this. The competition would be gaining a footprint in the state of Texas, and they would be losing a big-time moneymaker. But Nebraska is also a good moneymaker, just not quite as much as Texas A&M. So if this were to happen, it would definitely benefit the Big Ten more than the SEC. So the conference that I think would not be willing to do this, even though they wouldn't have a say because Texas A&M could leave whether the SEC wants it or not, would be the SEC. Because they would be allowing competition to infiltrate the state of Texas. The SEC does not want the Big Ten in the state of Texas. Just like the Pac-12 did not want the Big Ten in the state of California. But guess what? It happened. The Big Ten lured USC and UCLA out of the Pac-12 into the Big Ten. Nobody thought that was ever going to happen, but it did happen. So I'm saying this could actually happen. I could see this happening in the next 5 years. Both the Big Ten and the SEC have tremendous TV deal contracts coming up. Grant of rights, I'm not sure what that plays a factor into this. I don't know how long the grant of rights would be for each conference. But the window for this particular event to happen is within the next 2 years before the new TV deal actually takes into effect. So there is a small window where Nebraska could jump out of the Big Ten into the SEC and Texas A&M could jump out of the SEC into the Big Ten. Honestly, this would be very interesting. I would love to see this because I want to see Nebraska relevant again. And maybe it's a change of scenery. Maybe it is as simple as that. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they would get obliterated in the SEC. But remember, they do have Missouri. They do have Arkansas. They do have familiar teams in the SEC. I know Texas. They don't like Texas. But Oklahoma as well. So there are some familiar teams in the SEC that Nebraska would know and would get along with and could have success against. And I think the future of all the conferences will be to go without divisions. So even the dreaded SEC West, their days might be numbered because the Big 12 doesn't have divisions. The Pac-12 just went without divisions. The ACC is going without divisions this coming season. The Big Ten says they're going without divisions in 2024. And now the SEC is saying they're thinking about going without divisions. And I do think that that happens. So Nebraska wouldn't have to worry about being in the dreaded SEC West. So the scheduling would be much more broad, which that would make traveling a little more difficult because you would be traveling to teams in the SEC East a little bit more. But still, I think the schedule would even out. However, having said that, I do think that the SEC East is getting stronger and stronger. It could be that before divisions are given up, the SEC East could actually overtake the SEC West because teams like Tennessee, South Carolina, and Kentucky, they're building their brand. They're getting stronger. They have balanced out the SEC for the most part. We'll see if that trend continues. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number one, what do you think the chances are of Texas A&M going to the Big Ten and Nebraska going to the SEC? Number two, do you think both of these teams would have more success in their new conference? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.